Right.
I probably.
But that's what I'm saying, and we kicked you off on the work before we got the grant.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
good evening, board members and residents. I'd like to call to order the regular board meeting for Monday, June 23rd, 2014. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Batanti? Yes. Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Capral?
Here.
Mr. Tominello?
Here.
Mr. York?
Here.
Mr. Witt? Here. Mr. Verkest?
Here. Next on our agenda is the approval of the consent agenda, including approval of the regular board meeting minutes of June 9th, 2014, approval of the bills in the amount of $913,202.37, approval of the May 2014 revenue and expenditure report, and approval to pay Telto Contracting in the amount of $2,142.10 for sand and stone for water main breaks.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. York. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Capral to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Next is the approval of the regular agenda. Board members, there were discussed some changes to the agenda. At this time, item B3, the Water and Sewer Department has asked to table item B3. And there are also two additional emergency addendum items from the Water and Sewer Department. So I might propose, we've got one about design and engineering for $16,000. That could be B3. And one for consumers energy, that would be B4, if anyone would be willing to make the motion to make those changes.
Make a motion to approve the agenda with the proposed changes.
All right. Got a motion by Mr. York. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Witt. Discussion, board members. Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Next on the agenda is announcements. I've got a few announcements to make. The Harrison Township Public Library is hosting several upcoming events. A personal safety seminar with Sheriff Anthony Wickersham will be held this Wednesday, June 25th at 7 p.m. Tips and techniques that will keep you safe both when you're at home and while you're away will be discussed. Refreshments will be provided and registration is required. The family movie matinee will be taking place this Saturday, June 28th at 2 p.m. The movie The Nut Job will be playing. Participation is free and registration is required. Tales with Tales will be held Wednesday, July 16th, starting at 1 p.m. Children will get the opportunity to read to a therapy dog for 15 minutes. Again, pre-registration is required. For all of the library events, children need to be accompanied by an adult. If you'd like to register, you can stop in at the library or call 586-329-1261. The Harrison Township Beautification Commission presents Inspirations Garden Tour, Saturday, July 26th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Please contact 586-242-3868 for more information. The State of Harrison Township address will be held this Friday, June 27th at 8 a.m. And it's hosted by the Macomb County Chamber, and it'll be held at Wilson Marine. To register for the event, there's a link available on our website. And of course, for information on some of these other events, you can visit the township website, www.harrison-township.org. I'd also like to point out, if it might be appropriate this time, that today is our clerk Adam Witt's birthday. So happy birthday, Adam.
I couldn't imagine spending it at a better place.
But we should all be so lucky to be able to have a board meeting on our birthday.
Yeah.
Are there any other announcements? All right, hearing none, we'll go into our agenda. The first item on the agenda is B1 from the Water and Sewer Department regarding cement replacement at 5 locations. Mr. Hextall, could you tell us more about that, please?
Yes, board members, this is from the 62 water breaks. These are 5 locations that are a little large for the water and sewer personnel to handle on their own, larger square foot areas. And we normally come to you approximately this time this year. This year we have 5 areas that we are requesting permission to go ahead and have an outside contractor do the work. We received 3 bids, and Premier was the lowest, and the lowest bid this time. There was a very small dollar amount, but nonetheless, they were the low bidder, and he is willing, as soon as we give them approval, he will start immediately, which is something that we haven't had in the past. Normally, this time of year, everyone's so slammed in, but he has a larger company, more of a crew, so he'll accommodate us.
All right. Any questions on the item, or is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve the replacement of cement at 5 locations in the amount of $6,995 to the lowest bidder, Premier Concrete from New Baltimore.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. York. Is there support?
Support.
All right, support by Mr. Brado. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, board. Next is regarding, also from the Water and Sewer Department, regarding a contract to remove fill material. Mr. Axtell?
This also has to do with the 62 water breaks we had over the winter. When we excavate the water breaks, the spoils that we pull out cannot go back into the excavated hole in the roadways. We have property over near Siesta Street, across from Siesta and Jefferson, and that is our site where we store the excavated materials. And we have a lot more than we've had in many recent years. And we asked for 3 quotes. We received 2 of the 3 at the last minute. The third company that was quoting called and said they were unable to complete the quote because they had nowhere to put that much material. So they backed out on the bid. So I have 2 of 3. Cordis Brothers was the lowest. What they do, they come in with an excavator or loader, load their trucks, and they just keep hauling it out till it's gone and leave the site nice and level for us. And right now, I know there's the Sunnybrook dredging project, Clerk Witt and I have been discussing, and they could use a little more room over there. So once the spoils are gone, we're hoping we can set them up with another dredging bag and utilize the property until winter time, when we will need it again.
Okay. I know we'd talked also, because of the strong freeze and depth of the frost level, sometimes the spoil materials have some value, but you'd indicated that this was a pretty mixed batch of spoils.
Yes, the problem this year, the frost was so deep, and so we try to separate the asphalt and the cement away, and we'll put that at the shop and take it to Perspective. Cement goes to Paymar or Grasso, and it gets ground up and reused. Asphalt goes to Barrett Paving, and it's ground up and reused. But when the frost is that deep, we did it when we could, but we were actually using the Hughes. We were going 1 foot to 2 foot at a time, literally breaking frozen dirt that just come out in giant chunks because it was just solid as solid could be to get down. And so this winter was challenging, created some unusual issues, but nonetheless we made it.
All right. Any questions, board members, or is there a motion?
Make a motion to award the contract to remove the water main break fill material to the low bidder, Cordis Brothers, for $8,275. Support.
We've got a motion by Mr. York with support from Mr. Tominello. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, board. Next is item B3. I'm sorry, we tabled that. Next is item B3 regarding design and engineering of a sanitary sewer. We have Mr. Axtell here. Also, we have Mr. David Newmer from Wade Trim, our engineer, to tell us a little more about that.
Yes, this is a new project coming into the township for 8 homes on Coleridge Street at the intersection of North Point Parkway. Virtually just like the ones across Coleridge, there's gonna be 8 new homes. The builder would like to start building in the fall, so I apologize, Mr. Wood has been very patient with me in this agenda, this board meeting, because I brought a lot of things late. There was a consent judgment that went to court, and which he is now allowed to do this. The project calls for a 10-inch sanitary sewer. We would like to upgrade to a 30-inch sanitary sewer to eliminate our force main and would allow us bypass pumping and also have a natural gas backup generator on site installed at this time, which I know has been discussed with many board members, many staff meetings. It would just be a major relief. I know right before my starting date here, there was a sanitary backup in a lawsuit to the township, which cost over $1 million. Coleridge Sanitary Lift Station is the largest pump station in the township, has 3 very large pumps, and when there is a power failure or an issue with that pump station, we have a very short amount of time to get one of our generators out on site and get that running. And the generators we have, if it becomes a backup situation like that, we can run a maximum 2 pumps. 3 pumps usually take our large generator down. It will not run 3 pumps sufficiently. So we would like to move forward. The township would pay the difference between the 10-inch and the 30-inch sanitary sewer, which was in the consent judgment. And this is the time to do the right thing, as opposed to let them. We could easily say, okay, Woodlands Edge, go ahead, put your 10-inch sanitary sewer in, and we would scrape by, hopefully, like always. And I say hopefully, but this is the time to do the right thing, to where if something fails, we can bypass pump, we'll have a generator to bail us out. We're not in such a time crunch, and it eliminates the potential for catastrophe with residents' homes.
Yep. So currently, there's a 30-inch force main, meaning what would be considered a pressurized line, or it's the pump is forcing the sewage in front of this property. So in order for 8 home sites to be built, they can't tap into that because that pipe is actually under pressure, carrying the waste, further through the system. So they have to, at a bare minimum, put at least a 10-inch sewer that would gravity feed back into the system. Since they're going to go through that process of digging this up anyways, I think the estimate for the 10-inch was something around $80,000. We're looking at a total cost of about $205,000 when all is said and done to put a 30-inch main, abandon the old main, put a 30-inch main, but this would no longer be a force main, it would be a gravity-fed main. The significance there is we can actually have whatever sewage flows into the pump station, we lift and then drop into the gravity feed to continue down the system. That's important because if all 3 pumps were to fail, we still have portable pumps that we can put in and lift and drop it back into now a gravity-fed main, whereas our current system requires force system. It's not something we'd have to bypass pump 500 feet down the road. We'd have hoses running down the street in order to bypass, if we could even do such a thing. And if we wait, then at some point, 8 home sites are going to go in, 8 driveways are going to be there, landscaping, and 5 years from now, we're going to tear all that stuff up and put in a force main like we should in the first place. And again, that cost will eventually include a natural gas-powered backup generator. Right now, we're approving the $16,000 for the engineering so that the work can be designed and engineered and the work can begin. But we wouldn't want to design this without, or ask Mr. Newmer to proceed without making sure the board understands that, a month or 2 from now, or whatever that time frame is for the engineering, we're going to be coming back to the board, having a bid package and asking companies to bid on this, and likely looking at a cost of $200,000 in total. We'll do that work at a cost of $200,000. As those sites are built, 1/8 of the cost of the 10-inch main, which is estimated about $80,000, will be paid back to us. So our net cost is going to be about $125,000 based on the engineer's estimate.
Make a motion to approve the engineering expense not to exceed $16,000 to Wade Trim for the design and engineering of the sanitary sewer for the Woodland Edge subdivision.
Got a motion by Mr. York. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Tominello to approve the $16,000 in engineering costs for the sanitary sewer for Woodland Edge subdivision. Discussion, board members.
If I
It's
could,
really a bad motion, but, you know, it's really not for that subdivision. I mean, it's really for the benefit of
It
all
is a-
of the users.
True.
You know, I've been on the board 10 years, and I think in that 10 years, this pump station has been on the, or behind the scenes has been talked about for many, many, many years.
Sure.
And it's good that we're having, what, about a third of the expense done borne by the developer, and we pay the other 2/3, so.
Yes, sir.
That's a long-term
yeah.
infrastructure improvement. I mean, that's the way you gotta look at it.
Absolutely.
just a
Yeah, so I don't know if I like the tail end there with the.
Yeah.
question on the is this gonna go right out to bid after it gets in? Like the engineering's gonna get done, it's gonna get bid out right away?
Right, the $16,000 cost was for the engineering, but also the bid process. Wade Trim will manage the bid process.
So we'll get the final bid, the tallied bids back.
Yep,
at
the
a
next
future
time,
meeting.
exactly, the next time we're gonna be talking about this is we're gonna have some quantity of bids, you know, an opening session from the clerk's office and the results and the tabulation, and the board will be asked to approve one of those contractors. And again, time is, we wouldn't have brought this as an emergency item, but there is a timeline associated with this settlement, with the development. We've got a developer who wants to build homes, and we certainly welcome that. So if we didn't discuss this now, we'd be waiting 3 weeks before we even kick off the engineering, and that seemed irresponsible.
I have a question.
Yep.
The developer wants to build 8 homes. Let's say the developer breaks ground on 4 of them and 4 of them sit idle. He still pays a fee,
Somebody's
part of
gonna,
1/8.
right, someone's gonna
Whoever buys
pay,
that lot eventually. So
Absolutely.
eventually we may not get it all right away unless he sells them all. Hopefully he does.
right,
But if they don't, then we will down the road.
right, that runs with the land, correct? Right.
Does the $125,000 estimate include the cost of the pump as well? The backup pump?
Yes, that is. I'm
Well,
sorry.
not the backup pump,
Backup
generator.
Backup generator, yes,
Yep.
it does.
Right, it does. And is that backup generator, it sounds like a great idea, but is it being done at this point because it's necessary for this project?
No.
Or but
It's
nonetheless?
just, yeah, when you're doing the design and engineering, make the investment now. But if it came to be that we didn't want to make that investment, the rest of the project would still be logical.
But don't get me wrong, it sounds like a great idea, I'm
Sure.
just curious.
Yep,
The idea behind this, I think maybe I'm going to step in front of Mr. York, but the idea is that with the developer, we have to actually acquire an easement from him because now this is his property. So there's going to be a little bit of bartering, shall we say, for the easement of this placement of this generator. And so we want to do everything at the time because everything will be laid out on that parcel of land for the 8 homes, the generator at the, more near the corner near the station, and have the backup generator. This backup generator should have been installed before I ever started working here 16 years ago. This is just something that my goal, and in my time here, I'll be coming to you many times asking for backup generators for all of my sanitary lift stations because it's just time is of the essence, and nobody wants sanitary sewer in their home.
well, for a little while, they just want it to go away.
Yeah,
They don't want it coming back.
Do we still need to negotiate with the developer for the right to use the land for the backup?
Well, it's important to note, there already is right-of-way in the area. Our pump station has its own right-of-way. I think that when the engineering is complete, there may be a need for a corner. There may not be. That's something Mr. Newmer's gonna develop, but I think as much as it's important to say that there could be a need, I think there's also, the understanding that we don't wanna build 8 homes, have someone on the corner, and then all of a sudden make a change to that site, without that homeowner being aware that something's coming. Now is the time to do any necessary landscape screening or improvements so that when that builder develops that home and puts it up for sale, nobody's expecting future work.
Will this addition of the pump addition of the backup generator allow all pumps to run that? You had mentioned that today.
3 pumps, yeah.
Yes, sir.
2.
Now, I heard something new tonight that we didn't discuss in the last meeting.
Okay.
And So my understanding is we are going to essentially we're gonna do the project, lending the developer money, and the project, as he builds his homes, then we're gonna get our money. I, if we're gonna do that, we need to talk some interest rates for him and things of that nature, because we've had, many projects where we do this and people walk away and we got our money in the ground and people aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Is that a part of the consent judgment?
Unfortunately, yes, that is part of the consent
Okay.
judgment from court. So that is the way it is worded
Okay,
as
I
they
haven't
go.
read it, so.
Right,
Yes.
but there are things in there that bind the developer
And
as well. I mean,
the developer is bound, yes,
Yeah.
and I honestly, as fast as the first 8 went across the street, I can see these next 8, it should be like as we said, a welcome thing. For one, we're gonna get tax revenue, we're gonna get water revenue, sewer revenue, and
Wow.
and then obviously these improvements to the sanitary station and
Benefit a lot of people.
which in turn is a benefit for a large portion center of the township there.
I was on this board when that consent judgment, none of these other board members were on the board, I don't believe, during that.
I
And,
don't think so.
we heard, we have to do this tonight, we have to do it tonight, and that was, I think, 8 years ago.
Well,
And
that-
8 years later, I still don't have, homes there, so I'm a little worried about putting our money in the ground and him not
As you know,
performing.
this consent judgment is very thorough. Mr. Newmer and myself have discussed it. We've read it. This builder, Mr. Gilbert, has been very patient, and he's ready to roll. I mean, I certainly don't see a backup.
I would like to change my motion though, if I could. After engineering, design and engineering of the Coleridge Sanitary Pump Station. That way then, somebody reading the minutes later, a developer can't come back and say to us, well, you did it for him, which really wasn't the motion, it was to do our project for the community.
All right, Mr.
I
Tominelli?
will amend my support.
Okay.
One more question. Sure. The 83,000 number, is that a firm number from the developer, or is that an estimated cost?
Estimate.
So how do we, let's say your estimate is 10% low, does his side get bumped up the same 10%?
I believe the consent judgment says that we need to sit down with the developer and come to an agreement on what the value of his portion of the project would be.
Okay.
So that would need to occur. And probably the appropriate time to do that is when we get bids for the work, because then we'll have a lot of the bid items nailed down, we'll know what they are. All we have to do is then, the only variable then would be the cost of the 30-inch pipe versus the cost of the 10-inch pipe, because the construction and everything else is essentially the same.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we have, seeing no public comment, we have a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Tominello to approve the payment of $16,000 to Wade Trim for the design and engineering of the Coleridge Sanitary Sewer Pump Station. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next on the agenda, item B4, regarding a Consumers Energy gas service disruption. Mr. Axtell.
Okay, board members, this again leads back to water break season. Right here on Lance Cruz Street, we had 2 water breaks in that area. One of the excavations, we damaged 1.25 inches, and it was actually a gas service. We found out after the fact, you would think 1.25 inches would be a main, but it's a strange situation the way the main and the services ran, and it ran parallel with the road to a home. And once again, it was due to the fact of deep frost and ground conditions, and at the time we were on that break, it was 24 below zero. We hit the gas, you automatically stop, and the gas company came out, repaired it. It took some time. Obviously, conditions were tough for them also. Long story short, they sent me a bill for the $4,700, and I apologize, my printer, I had an issue, and so I'm sort of going. But it was very simple. The $4,700 seemed extremely high to me. I was not real receptive to that dollar figure because they had multiple vehicles out there and personnel. And so, but then Karen Hodges, the woman from Consumers, I met with her, and she was willing to work with me to reduce the price because it couldn't have worked any more conveniently. Consumers Energy came in and was doing some work, and they hit one of our water services. And so in the old days, it used to be that, you know, if it was in the fair ballpark, everything was pretty much a wash. You know, you scratch my back, I scratch your back. Those things are not like that anymore. So she sent me the bill for $4,700, and as I said, I apologize. I sent them a bill which was actually more than that. And I agreed to reduce mine, she agreed to reduce hers. As soon as I sent the bill, we had our check within 4 or 5 days. They paid us immediately. They paid us more than this reduced amount that we are paying them for the $2,200 that we got it down to. And she said it was truly a matter of having that many personnel out there, because being in the bitter conditions, they were rotating people. And, you know, we already had everything excavated, which was great for them. But swapping back and forth and then having to go home to relight appliances and so on. So she was more than willing to work with us, and this is the conclusion we come to. So I think it's more than fair.
Mr. Supervisor, I make a motion to pay the Consumer Energy revised invoice in the amount of $2,822.84.
We've got a motion by Mr. Tominello. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Capral. And I think as a commentary, I recognize where there was a time when, you know, amongst work crews, they'd say, look, you know, this just happened to be the way that it was. This time of the year, in you know, early January, it's hard to hand dig around gas lines if, you know, just based on the conditions, so these things happen. But I can understand where we've reached a time where, you know, due to maybe people abusing a situation like that, you know, they say, look, let's itemize the expenses. If you've got a bill, you itemize yours, and, you know, it needs to be accounted for. So it seems responsible. Any other discussion?
Mr. Supervisor, I'd just like to comment and appreciate Mr. Axtell's work in getting the invoice lowered. I think it's commendable to look into these things and not simply just pay what's asked without doing some investigation. So I appreciate that diligence and cost savings to the township. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. Any other discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, we have a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. Capral to pay the Consumers Energy revised invoice in the amount of $2,822.84. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next on the agenda,
I'd like to just thank you, board members, for everything. I know I brought a lot to the table tonight, and especially to Mr. Witt for his patience with my items rolling in late, and Mrs. Lucido for helping me with the agenda. Thank you.
thank you. Next on the agenda, item C1, approval to hire 2 smart bus drivers at $11 per hour with no benefits. Board members, we have our summer shuttle that runs on the weekends during the summer months to offer a benefit to boaters and other folks that might be spending the weekend, or residents who would like a shuttle around town. One of our summer shuttle drivers found that she was no longer able to drive based on personal reasons. So 2 individuals, Mrs. Lori Lesmeister and Mrs. Jeannie Theory, had applied for that position. Generally speaking, these drivers that we employ during the summer months are school bus drivers. So they've already gone through a qualification process. They're certainly qualified to drive the buses that we have. And so we look to that pool of drivers to see if anyone's interested in some weekend work. We had 2 individuals that expressed an interest. So the proposal here is to hire Mrs. Lori Lesmeister and Mrs. Jeannie Theory for the summer shuttle smart driver at a rate of $11 per hour with no benefits. Is there a motion or a discussion?
Make a motion to approve the 2 new bus drivers.
All right. Support. Support by Mr. Witt. We've got a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Witt. Any discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Okay, next on our agenda, item C2 regarding a road millage resolution. Board members, last year in March, the Board of Trustees formed and funded a local road improvement committee, actually at the March 25th 2013 regular board meeting. We also, the motion included funding for Wade Trim to assist us with some of the engineering and support. The committee met several times, worked with Wade Trim to resolve several issues relative to a plan to address local roads. The committee, really ultimately through Mr. Newmer, produced a report which was reviewed at a workshop here on May 5th of 2014. The recommendation as a result of that report was, in order to address all roads in the township over a period of 20 years, a millage of 1.25 mils for a 20-year period. During the workshop, there was some discussion about drainage, and there was a suggestion made to increase the millage for up to 1.5 mils for a 20-year period. It's important to understand that we aren't bound. First and foremost, this proposal is to place the millage on the ballot in November. What I know that I've seen in the supervisor's office is I've seen an increased number of residents approaching the township saying, what can be done with my road? The road is crumbling, you know, what can we do? Some of the neighborhoods have at least begun the process of working with the clerk's office to establish a special assessment district. Currently, that's the only method that residents on a particular road would have to undertake the repair of local roads. Public Act 51, the state's act that they use to split up dollars for road construction, Public Act 51 requires a match for any money spent to reconstruct local roads. So unless we have something in place, some funding mechanism, we will never see local roads repaired. It is important to understand that in the state of Michigan, and I'm sure probably in other states, all of our roads are graduated through a series of terms. So we have a local road. That was what we would probably most likely think of as the road that we live on. It might be a dead-end road. It might be a 25-mile-per-hour road. We have collector roads. Those are roads that might still be 25 miles an hour, but they might be thoroughfares. So for example, Lance Cruz and Town Hall right here, those are considered collector roads. They might be a trunk that someone might use to go from Metro Parkway to South River or to connect, you know, two other major roads. Then they have regional, and I can't remember all the different names, but there's several names based, you know, in other words, we don't consider, I suppose we could say a side road that dead ends nearby here that might come off of Town Hall, that's a local road. Town Hall is considered to be a higher level road. Town Hall might collect to South River, which is designed to handle higher volumes of traffic. Metro Parkway would be considered yet another level of road. I-94 obviously, or Gratiot, or, you know, these are all different levels of roads. So, but local roads specifically have limited funding through Public Act 51 and no funding without a match. But this issue before the Board of Trustees today is not to impose a millage. It's not to, you know, produce this millage. It is in response to the elevated number of requests we've had to address local roads. It is in response to the fact that neighboring communities have looked at the same approach. I know that one of the things one trustee had asked me about was, what if 5 years from now the funding model changes and gas taxes go up and there is money for local roads? We aren't bound by this. What we're asking is residents to consider a millage of up to 20 years for up to 1.5 mils. If we ever thought that we needed more than 1.5, only voters can approve that. If we found that we don't need any, the Board of Trustees has the ability to reduce that to 0 at any point in that 20-year period. So ultimately what this is in response to requests from residents saying, what can we do to address the roads? If you were to work with your neighbors to establish a special assessment district on your street, 51% of the residents have to agree to that. And then the cost of that road is borne by the people who live on that road. With a millage such as this, that cost is dispersed over a larger number of taxpayers, including commercial taxpayers that might not otherwise be on a local road. So this is maybe a model that might disperse that cost. But if this board sees fit to put this on the November agenda, I'll say, I think it's important that it's on the November agenda. This November, we'll be electing a governor and a U.S. senator. I think it's reasonable to expect that voter turnout is high. If this board approves to do this, then this goes on the agenda, on the ballot, in November, and one of two things happens. The residents of Harrison Township vote to approve it, which is good, or the residents of Harrison Township vote to turn it down, which is also good. I just believe that this is a decision that the residents should be given the opportunity to consider and basically to self-govern. I'll also say that, of course, I'm bringing this agenda item, just putting it on the agenda. If we do support placing this on the November ballot, I will be coming to the board with some suggestions and a request to produce what you see on a lot of times on millage, on ballot question items, an informational piece. You know, what is the millage? What will it cost the homeowner? You know, what happens if it passes? What happens if it fails? Why isn't the Department of Roads? That sort of thing. Obviously, something approved by this board. But the point in that is not to say that I want people to vote for it or against it. I want to make sure that we supply the information to each voting household in Harrison Township so that prior to them going to the ballot box, they understand what the cost is and what the implications are. And again, it's June, we have till November, but I think it's important that if we do put this on the ballot, that we take the time to make sure voters are informed.
The other part of that is prior to November, sort of establishing some guidelines for how it would be dispersed so that people have a full and true understanding of, if it is approved, where that money would go, what breakdowns. Basically, the board considering whether or not to adopt some of the recommendations brought by that committee so that way people, if this does go on in November, have a full information to be able to make an intelligent, informed decision. So.
Right, so there was a discussion and a recommendation in the road report as to how to handle local roads, how to handle private roads, how to handle dirt roads. The committee discussed, for example, that we may have a homeowner who purchased a vacant lot on a dirt road, and maybe they paid $10,000 for that lot, and they built their home on that lot. Whereas maybe someone else at the same time decided to purchase a home where a developer had paved a road, and perhaps they paid $40,000 for that lot. And the idea would be that they've already paid some additional amount for that property when they made the initial purchase. Now you've got two homes constructed. It doesn't seem fair to assess a tax that we're going to tax the fellow on the paved road to pay for the dirt road. However, it doesn't seem fair to assess a tax for the fellow on the dirt road and not give him some benefit from the taxes. You may recall the road report, in the road report, the engineer identified that the cost to reconstruct a paved road was $57,000 per mile, whereas the cost to construct a new road from a gravel road within the report was $233,000 per mile, or just about 4 times the cost. So repaving a road to building a paved road where there's a dirt road, it's 4 times the cost to pave that dirt road. The recommendation by the committee and the engineer was to say that anyone who's on a dirt road who wishes to pave that road would receive 25% of the cost from this millage. And again, that's a policy or an issue that this board would have to decide, and I think, like Mr. Witt's saying, that would be a part of that process, coming back to this board with several policy suggestions. I don't believe it's fair to ask voters to approve a millage and not give them some idea of what that policy would be. But the recommendation at the time was not to make the ballot question 6 pages long with several policy issues. Another suggestion from the road committee was to establish a 5-member citizen committee that would work with the Department of Roads and the township engineer to look at what roads to do in what order. They also have to work in conjunction with our water and sewer department. You don't want to pave a road and then come back 2 years later, tear it up to replace water and sewer underneath, so you've got to coincide those issues. So some of those things need to be put down on paper, agreed to by the board, so that when people are voting on this, we're not saying we're gonna assess a millage and we don't know how we're gonna spend the money. I think those are reasonable questions that should be answered before we should ask folks to vote yes or no.
Well, I think we're putting the cart before the horse right now. I think we need to answer those questions before we put it on the ballot. How are you gonna do that? I can see a scenario if this passes where this room is filled with people yelling and screaming that you chose, Street A over Street B versus Street C versus Street D. And man, I've been paying this millage for 18 years and I'm still on this street and we're not set up till 20 years. And if I would have known that when I voted, I certainly wouldn't have voted that way. I think we need to answer those questions prior to this vote. And I've always said all along, and I don't want to get into a debate, but the township doesn't own the roads. Unlike St. Clair Shores, some people might have seen in the news recently, St. Clair Shores, I think, had a millage renewal coming up for their roads. Well, St. Clair Shores owns their roads. They get their Act 51 money, what's called Act 51 money, from the state. That's their share of the gas tax money, and they're responsible for all their roads, and they get to pave their roads and make the decisions on the roads and hire the contractors on the roads. But being a township, we don't own the road. The county owns the road. The county's responsible for the road. And the county gets our Act 51 money. And even when we want to do a road, this board isn't the one in charge. The county's the contractor. And they go out and get bids for the road, and they run the project, and they get a nice little admin fee for doing that. That's always been my position on these issues. And as far as the match goes for the local roads, if the county is giving a match for whatever street, local road, say Street A, why can't the people doing SAD get the match from the county and off they go? I've never heard that option before on here, but that's just my opinion, and I certainly don't want at the end of the day to be having to pick winners and losers and what we're going to do. I'd like everything up front so everybody knows that if you're on Street C, if you do it, well, maybe you'll be year 15 and you'll be year 1 and 3 and 5, whatever that works out to be.
If I understand what you're saying, that there's a system in place for special assessments having to handle that process, but if that process was so efficient and so effective at repairing and maintaining our roads, our local roads wouldn't be in the condition that they're in today. And given the fact that the system is broken, and I think everyone could admit that the way that road money is spent, whether it's the funding structure or the way that those projects are bid out, is broken, and the legislature is really not showing any sign that they're going to have any comprehensive fix in the near future, I think it's incumbent upon us as the local body, the people that get those phone calls about the road in front of my house, about the SAD project, if it's not us, it won't be anybody else. We need to help ourselves if we're going to want a solution to this problem.
Well,
Can I finish what I'm saying, or would you like to interrupt me?
You know what I would, Adam, if you want to get angry and make a nasty debate.
No, I'm just saying.
Get all personal.
I'm in the middle of talking.
There's no reason to get all personal.
Look, do you mind if he finishes?
Finish. I don't know why you're getting all angry. There's no reason to be angry.
Okay.
I'm not being angry. I just
finish.
want to finish talking.
Yeah.
I was sort of finishing up with that. I would like to make a motion to adopt the resolution placing the road millage question on the November 4th, 2014 ballot.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Capro. Okay, we can continue discussion. Was that the end of your discussion?
That was, I just wanted to
Yep.
do that, so we're
Okay,
on
seems
question and
reasonable.
we
Yep,
can,
we're debating
It's fine,
the
there's no
subject
reason
of
to
it.
get nasty about it.
So speaking as a resident, so I'm not speaking as a trustee or a treasurer, but as a resident, this is what we're gonna hear. I live on a collector road. The people in my subdivision, including Mr. Brado, we paid, when we bought our house, lots of money for the freeway in front of where I live. The county is going to fix that road when it finally deteriorates. It's a collector road. It's their responsibility. They sat right there back in 1990. Well, I can't
It
remember
needs to
the
be
year.
repaired now.
But they sat there and said that it was their responsibility. So people like me, we will pay into this for 20 years, whatever, $175 a year, and I will never get a benefit. And I think you're going to hear that from several people, or several citizens around the township, and that's why you always go back to this SAD. You know, once some people want to live on a dirt road, and that's evidenced by they just don't want to do an SAD. And I don't think if we told them we were going to give them 75% of the money, I don't know that they would change the road. I think that's not a very good economic decision for them, but, you know, when people improve that road, and I don't know the exact statistics, but last time we looked at this is probably 4 or 5 years ago. You know, when you put that $5,000 investment, your house is going to probably go up $25,000. Just being on a paved road becomes more desirable. More people will want to buy that, especially in the center of this township. Those are very, very big lots, and center of the township would probably be one of the premier places to live, to be honest, if there wasn't all the dust. But we do know that the county does take care of those roads because they come and scrape them, and the township board pays to have a brine solution put on the roads a couple times a summer to keep the dust down. So.
Mr. Tymedall?
Yeah, Mr. Supervisor, first of all, I want to say, I think we discussed this. I think we do need to do something about our roads. And so, I'm sure not, I guess until I get these questions answered, I'm not sure if we want, or if I'm in favor of placing this on the ballot. And here's what I'm concerned about. When we first reviewed the road study, I was very skeptical, but as we went through it and as I read it over and over again, I thought it was very plausible. I felt that it leveraged grant money for roads, which was a really good thing. It talked about improved and unimproved roads. So if you had an unimproved road, you only received a 25% allotment. If you had an improved road, you'd have 100% allotment towards reworking the road. And I can tell you, I did some numbers because we, in our subdivision, which is here on Point, we actually looked at, and we're looking at into an SAD to cap our roads. If I look at the cost that we got to recap our roads versus the 10-year or 20-year millage at 1.25%, 1.25 mils.
1.5 is what it was. wasn't
Well, it was 1.25
Right,
before we
understood.
added drainage.
Yep.
And I'll get to that in a minute.
Mhm.
Actually, it was about a wash. So if I paid 1.25 mils on the value of my home versus an SAD over a 5-year period that goes on my taxes, it was about a wash. So it looked very intriguing to me. When we had our last discussion, we included drainage because we talked about we're going to improve roads, and then if we improve roads and don't improve drainage, it's so all for naught, right? If we don't improve drainage, we're going to have issues. The thing is, we pulled a number out of our hat, 0.25 mils. I can tell you, and here on Point, going back in the mid-'80s, we created an SAD to not only improve our roads, but to improve our drainage. I can tell you the cost to improve our drainage was 3/4 of the cost to improve the roads. So by pulling 0.25 mils and just throwing it in there with no plan on how you're going to execute drainage for roads, which is needed. I'm very confused on how we're doing, because again, the road study was a beautiful plan, and you know what, I gotta tell you, you guys did a great job, thanks to Mr. Newmer, but I have not seen anything in that same caliber for the drainage, and I think we're kidding ourselves if we even put this to the residents and say 0.25 mils is gonna cover drainage, when we know drainage is probably more than half of the cost of road improvements. So, that's about all I have to say.
Sure. Well, let me address that. Two things that you'd mentioned that I think are important. One was when you'd said an SAD for your community would have cost you X amount of dollars over 5 years versus a 20-year period, the cost was a wash.
Yes.
I think it's important for you to understand the benefit is not a wash. And that is because the school buses that we all pay for travel on more than just your roads. So the longevity and the condition of those buses are certain to benefit from more improved roads and less dirt roads. Every road that you travel, when you pick up your son and he wants to go to a friend's house, or you go to visit a neighbor, or you drive any number of the other roads just traveling through the township, the benefit to you as a resident of Huron Point is greater than just the improvement of your road. For certain, we each look at this in terms of, we want to improve our local roads. That's the primary goal. But I say, keep in mind that number one, the cost may be a wash, but the benefit far exceeds just our individual immediate local road. Second thing is, drainage in Huron Point may have been 3/4 of the cost. There are several pump stations in that entire neighborhood, and the cost for drainage in Huron Point couldn't possibly be compared to the cost for drainage in other neighborhoods. Furthermore, in most of the neighborhoods where we're going to improve roads, there is existing drainage. So, for example, on several roads, the cost for drainage is already borne by the county and there is no additional work. But there are some roads that have things like collapsed culverts, or a need to clean out things, or replace a culvert where a driveway crosses the ditch. But truly, and when we approach Mr. Newmer to say, what would the cost for drainage be? It's important to understand that the basis for this road study was existing data that someone had collected by what they called a windshield study, but by literally driving every yard, every mile, every foot, whatever you want to call it, of roadway in the township. To say that now we'll go back to Mr. Newmer and say we're going to do that same study for drainage, it's well outside the scope of what we could do. So you're absolutely right. 1/4 mil is a guess. It's not guaranteed. It's not for certain. We could spend another year and we probably wouldn't be able to agree on what that number is. But it was an attempt to place in that millage some funding. It's very possible that even after doing this study, maybe, especially as property values rebound, maybe 1.25 mils isn't necessary to do the roads. But we know that there's a need to address drainage, and it was an additional 20% to try to address drainage in some areas. But I don't know that I would say it would be equal to say, for example, on some roads where there's existing drainage, the road was constructed more recently, and the majority of that drainage is functional, to say that that's the same as it's engineering an entire drain system with several pump stations in another community.
And I agree, that there's pros and cons. I guess I'm still very skeptical when we talk about drainage and we're just swagging it.
It is.
And I can give you an example. When we put the bike path in from 16 Mile Road to Jefferson, that went in, it was engineered.
16 to South River, maybe?
I'm sorry, 16 to South River Road. It was engineered, everything was put in, it was supposed to be, first class. First thing that happened, we had drainage issues.
Correct.
They had to go back out there and they had to redo all the drains because we had puddling along the road. The road continued to break up.
Mhm.
We had no idea. So I
Right.
guess what I'm saying is, I'm not against this. I think we need to do something. I just think we have been very systematic and we have been very precise on the road study. We are not very precise on the drainage. And I understand there's many variables, but if you're gonna ask people for that kind of money, I think, you don't wanna go back to them and say, 1.25 is not enough because the drainage was a lot more than we thought, so now we need more.
understood.
Or some projects may not happen because we don't have enough money.
Just sort of talking about the drainage from some of our experience looking at the SAD projects that have come forward in the last year and a half or so. A project where it's basically improving the existing ditching, resetting culverts, making sure those pitches are correct. The idea was that this would cover that type of project.
But where's that defined? We haven't defined that.
Sure. No, and I understand the other side of the coin is a area like yours where you have to do something that'll increase the cost of the project 10 times over. But I mean, we can't plan, and I get that it's a guess, but I think it's a guess based on some informed decision from the engineer. I don't think this was something that, I think after the meeting we had talked to Mr. Newmer and he said, it's a good guess. Does it cover every situation? No, but will it help address the roads that you're putting in? Yeah.
The flip side of that is I wouldn't want to assume 75% of the cost of the road is going to be consumed in drainage and then propose to folks a millage that's over 2 1/4 mils and say, well, that's not indicative of those roads. So my point is that for us to get that number, we'd have to literally look at each mile of roadway in Harrison Township and say, this road is going to need a level of 1 drain improvements up to a level of 10 and multiply that cost. And I'm saying it's simply beyond the scope. It's responsible for us to consider drainage to the extent that we can. But there are so many other factors when it comes to this. For example, in the case where you've got a street that currently doesn't have sanitary sewers, you're not going to tear up the road and replace it and then come back later and put sanitary sewers in. There has to be some additional funding to put sanitary sewers in there. The work that's involved in adding sanitary sewers to a street that doesn't have it is definitely going to exceed the scope of the immediate roadway. It's going to involve some of that, and it's going to involve some of the excavation that's going to involve a drain. But to quantify that, to say we did a study and we know that the additional amount of millage should be 0.32 or 0.15 or 0.7, we just simply can't get that close at this time. We just don't have that data to be able to nail that number down. So it was an educated guess, but I won't imply to you that in any way it was much more than a guess. It's an estimate.
So I guess my, in closing, so other folks can have time to talk, I think it needs to be defined. So, under the current plan, road study plan, we talked about for an unimproved road, we were going to contribute 25% to improve the road.
Mhm.
Well, if that includes sanitary sewers, is that going to be now 30% or 35% that we're going to subsidize? But that's not defined. See, it's
No,
not
it's just a
defined.
road. Cost of sanitary sewers, this is a road millage. It's for roads.
Okay, I'm sorry, so let's not talk about sanitary sewers, let's talk about drainage. So are you gonna add more, instead of giving them 25%, are you gonna give them like 30 or 35 to handle their drainage as well?
25% of the cost.
Yes. Are you gonna, I guess what I'm saying is, the drainage piece is not defined.
Mhm.
So I guess what I'd be looking at, if we can somehow define that, and maybe that's, what we're gonna talk about before November, where we're going to put together criteria that is going to govern how this money is dispersed, how it's used, both on paving and drainage. I'm okay with that.
Right.
As long as that's defined.
Correct.
Right now, again, I'm struggling because that's not defined.
Understood.
On the road side, it's defined. On the drainage side it is not.
Right, right.
Okay.
And so let me address that. To the extent that we can, if this board chooses to give voters the choice to impose this tax on themselves, that's what I'm asking this board to do tonight. Beyond that, if the board chooses to give voters that choice, then we need to come back and make some policy recommendations that this board will approve. I can guarantee you, though, no matter what we try to think of in the next month in that policy, we're completely missing 2 or 3 significant items. We are, if we put this on the ballot, and if the voters choose to approve this in November, I guarantee that there's some things we won't know. I also guarantee we'll have some very strong partners in the Department of Roads. As an example, when we built the path along Jefferson between Metro Parkway and South River Road, the construction management for that project was our engineering provider. Not Wade Trim, I don't want to say that, but another engineering services provider. And As a result of that work, we actually had catch basins where drains ran into the catch basin and there was no outlet. So all the water would run in and it would just pour out the top. It was just horrifically managed. Contractor didn't mind. They were allowed to get away with whatever they would. So we did the best we could to go back to correct those things and get someone else to pay for them. Phase 2 of our path project was managed by Macomb County Department of Roads. I can't even point out a significant drainage issue on a much larger project through phase 2. The point is that we have in the Department of Roads an excellent partner. We know that last year, with our fiscal year began October 1st, the Department of Roads said, we're gonna give away up to $2 million in our budget for grants to do local roads. We weren't able to get any of those $2 million. How big of a variable is that in this millage? That grant could go away or it could grow. We just can't estimate it that close, but I know that if we don't adopt a road millage and begin this process, our local roads will continue to crumble. And I accept if the voters say in November, we're comfortable either A, waiting, B, going with a special assessment district, or C, doing nothing. It's an okay answer. But I feel it would be irresponsible if we don't do the legwork, which we did, talk to our partners and municipal partners, such as the Department of Roads, come up with a plan. We'll have to further refine that plan as this process goes forward, but give the voters the option to say, if you'd like, the only way you could vote on a road millage is if we put it on the ballot. And that's really what I'm asking this board for tonight.
And I can tell you, Mr. Supervisor, that one of the biggest advantages of this millage is to leverage those road grants. So if there's 200K out there to improve a road, and we have 200K we can spend, those are matching funds. That was one of the biggest things that sold me on the initial road study and proposal.
It's also important to note that when we pay gas taxes, Macomb County, as a county, is a donor county. So for every dollar that we spend in gas taxes, we don't receive a dollar in funding back from the state. Same goes with federal dollars. Michigan is a donor state. The fact is that if you pay $1 in this millage, you'll get at least $1, if not more, if we're able to leverage it with grants. But this money can't be spent in any other township, city, community, anywhere except Harrison Township.
Okay.
So if you're gonna spend dollars on roads, this is probably the only way that it'll be guaranteed that you'll get at least $1, if not more, back in actual road improvements.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Mr. Supervisor, as the comments have been made, I think it's critical that we develop a policy around this.
Mhm.
And I think that much of that is outlined in the technical memorandum dated April 30th, 2014.
Mhm.
So we have to be assured that we can somehow put that into a document.
Absolutely.
Voters understand what they're going to be voting for. And I think some of the critical things, as Mr. York alluded to, prioritization of projects will be critical. Now, while I don't think we can come up with a list of projects, I do think that we should be able to somehow identify how projects will be evaluated as part of the information that will be disseminated to the residents. I think that's critical, and I also think that there needs to be specific wording drawn out for the differentiation between an unimproved roads and those that have been improved. I think that's critical because there will be those people that certainly have the comment that they bought on an improved road. So I think if we can be assured that will happen and we can put that out collectively, I'm comfortable with that. But I think it's critical to this process.
Yep, the definition of terms, I'm not so concerned with. And we can actually, ask Mr. Newmer for some guidance on language as to how roads are chosen. The difficult process in that, though, is right now, if in year one, if this generates $1 million and we've got $1 million to spend, we have more than $1 million worth of roads that need attention right now. So that process that we're going to have to go through is a process that ultimately we decide. So, in other words, we can't legislate away the responsibility to choose which projects. To the extent that we can make it an open process, the policy and the road report suggest adopting or appointing a citizen body to make those decisions, to work with Mr. Newmer, to work with Mr. Axtell regarding sewer projects, to work with the Department of Roads. But ultimately, they're only making a recommendation to us, and this Board of Trustees is the only body that can say, nope, we're gonna not do that road, we're gonna choose to do this road instead, or vice versa. So what we can't, we can certainly talk about criteria, but in the short term, there'd have to be, if nothing else, a lottery system. In the first year, you'd have to say, well, we're gonna spend X amount of dollars on this type of road, X amount of dollars on that type of road. All right, we've got 20 roads here and 10 roads there, and we can only afford to do 2 of each, or 3 of each in the first year. You'd have to have some other random system. You couldn't narrow all of them down. But there are variables, again, based on infrastructure. If you've got a road where you really need water and sewer improvements underground, and Dave says, that road I need to do next, it's imperative, we need to do that road in the next year, that's gonna bring that road forward. On the contrary, if the infrastructure on a particular road happens to be in better shape and there isn't a need to do that work for a 5-year period, it's gonna change that priority. There's a ton of moving parts that are involved in this.
It seems complicated, but I do think we're going to have to make some effort at defining.
Correct.
At a high level how that's going to work.
Absolutely.
Because it would be among one of my big questions if I was just learning about this.
Yep.
You know, one question becomes, I thought the county was responsible, so we have to explain that to some extent.
And they
the
are
other thing-
responsible, I'd never say that, but
course.
I get your point.
And the other thing is the prioritization. We have to have at least some high level of explanation as to how that will occur, even if it isn't perfect.
Right.
Thank you.
And that's what needs to be defined. I'm sorry, jumping in here again, because I was just thinking when you're talking, Mr. Bertani, is that, you know, for somebody, for people who lived on an unapproved road, even though they're gonna get 25%, they still have to create an SAD to improve the road.
Right.
Right.
And-
So, you know, we need to make sure people understand
Right.
that. So if
Correct.
you live on a gravel road, yeah, we're gonna give you 25%, but if you can't create an SAD to improve that road, you're not gonna get any money.
I can tell you right now, we have 2 SAD projects that are waiting to go forward because they want to be the first in line for that match.
Well, that's a
Because
good
because
thing. That's a
because
good thing.
they look at it and they say, you know what, this is a good opportunity. I think it's a fair price. There, some people picked up some petitions and said, you know what, we'll hold off until
Right.
October, you know, to start that ball, so we're
Right.
in line.
And,
for
and a
this.
lot of the dirt roads, a lot of the unimproved or the gravel roads also are on septic systems. And septic systems in our township are not gonna be around forever.
No, I understand.
So-
I just
So
wanted to
there,
bring
there's
that
also
because-
a potential
Because
cost
those
associated
are
with
the
that.
requirements I talked about along with drainage that all need to be defined.
Right.
Because I think if we don't do a good job educating the residents on those requirements, you know, it's not gonna have, the vote is not gonna have a chance.
Correct, which is why I said, you know, I wouldn't want this board to vote on this issue only to be surprised that later, within a meeting or two, something's in front of you saying, here's several policies that I want the board to adopt pending the approval of this. And I received 3 quotes for a trifold brochure that answers all these questions. And so, you know, we want to send that to every registered voter in Harrison Township at a cost of X. And that brochure isn't going to be, I mean, I may play a role in creating it, but it's ultimately going to be approved by this board. Again, it's going to be, you know, we got a road committee, we try to work together and get this, but it's ultimately this board's responsibility to approve that. My point is, I don't want to ask folks to consider this millage without educating them and without answering those questions. So, I mean, with all due respect, that's part of what started this
Right.
conversation. But the issue is if this board has no will to ask the voters to consider this, there's no sense in spending, you know, hours and hours creating a brochure, answering policies, when the board said this is just flat nuts. I don't think anyone in the township wants to even consider this option, and that's my point. The next step, we drafted language that would, you know, basically belong on a ballot. Is this board willing to move forward? We look at some policies. This board ultimately, even if we come up with a policy next month, doesn't mean we might not consider 2 years from now to say, you know, we really didn't think about this one issue. We need to modify that policy. You know, we're starting from ground zero here.
So one last thing that I just want to share with you is that I sit on the Huron Point Homeowner Association as a trustee, and I can tell you our meeting from 2 months ago, you know, we talked about weed control in the canal. We talked about lighting improvements, maybe having some type of lighting. We talked about street signs. We talked about dredging, and we had talked about roads, and we asked our residents what was most important to them. And by far, almost 100% were roads. Dredging, weed control, which are very hot items at this time of year, we're way, way down on the list. So it is on the top of everybody's list. I think everybody is you know, are socializing the roads, and they want to do something to improve the roads. So, thanks very much. I'll shut up now.
You know, I hate to throw another wrinkle in this, but
Are you sure? You hate it?
no. If you're talking about doing the center of the township, now that we brought up septic systems, right? So if you're doing the center of the township and these people are coming, say this passes and you're doing the center of the township, and we're obviously gonna be doing sewers, I mean, I'll just ask the question, where's the money gonna come from for the sewer improvement without raising the water sewer fees to everybody else? Because I will assure you, Ken, trust me, Ken, I'm the treasurer, I see the accounts. I was part of this.
It sounded
board.
like you were asking a question.
I was part of this board. No, what I'm saying is, we don't have the money right now in the bank, in the water sewer bank. We have some, you know, but it's sort of been dwindling because we've been doing a lot of big projects, pump stations and things of that nature. But when you start getting into these sewer projects, you know, $6 million fund balance, you know, gone in just a minute.
Yeah, it's not a project for the fund balance. Sewers would require an SAD. So the cost of installing sewers is gonna fall on the people who would be receiving those sewers. That process would be an SAD process. To say that we're gonna, again, to say that we would tax people through water rates in areas of the township, the majority of whom already have sanitary sewer service, is unrealistic. The reality is, if people do receive sanitary sewers, there is revenue that will come from that will assist in the financing or the cost of that, and Mr. Newmer's already identified some of those costs in another study that we'd asked him to do. But the short answer to your question is, sanitary sewers are not gonna, the cost of sanitary sewer installation is not going to be borne by every resident in the form of water and sewer rate increases. It's gonna be borne by those people who would be on the street that would immediately benefit, because there are several different costs that go toward that. There's the tap, the hookup, there's, you know, potentially new water lines on a street that already has water, depending on what condition that is. That's a whole separate discussion, but that cost would be an SAD cost.
Okay, well, once again, we started a sewer rehabilitation project, or putting sewers in, and we don't have anything on the books that says people have to hook up to the
Actually, we
sewer.
do. We do.
Well,
We just
then-
don't enforce it.
Okay, well,
That
then maybe we need to get our money out of the ground then, because we got a lot of money in the ground in sewers that, you know, the water sewer department put in that is just sitting in there. And, you know, I've brought up many times, this isn't for tonight, but, you know, Clinton Township brought up a few years ago, they had a thing, we're gonna increase all of our tap fees and this and that. I think they doubled them or something, and said, if you don't hook up by X amount of date, after that, it's X amount of dollars, and encourage people to hook up. Because the reality is, we have a lot of failing septic systems, and we want people to hook up, and that's why they had that federal grant in the first place to put those sewers in, but that's for another day.
Yes, sir. Is there any other discussion, or we could open up the floor for public comment?
Mr. Supervisor?
Yep.
Maybe if I've been taking some notes, maybe I can.
Yeah. Yeah, please, yeah, jump in.
Couple of thoughts.
Yep, maybe you'd answer some resident questions before they might ask them.
Yeah, well, maybe these will help to maybe frame some of the discussion that the board's having. In regard to the storm sewer, Mr. Tominello is correct. That was, you know, the 0.25 mils is a guess. It's kind of an educated, seems like a decent amount type of a guess. I did a little bit of number crunching here. If we're looking at increasing 0.25 mils, that's about a 20% increase in the total millage. That would be about a $5 million revenue over the total program, life of the program. The majority of the drainage improvements are likely to be done on roads that need to be reconstructed completely, versus roads that just need a mill and overlay or a cap. Because the roads that need a mill and overlay or a cap probably have fairly decent drainage because the water hasn't destroyed the roadbed yet. If we look at that, we've got about 53 miles, give or take, of roads that need reconstruction within the township. So if we back that cost out, that comes in at about $94,000 a mile that we would be allocating towards drainage. Now, to put that into perspective, we talked about $57,000 a mile to overlay, to mill and overlay a road, and $233,000 to completely rebuild a new road. So that puts us in the middle there. We've got, it's about a third, a little more than a third of the cost of reconstruction that we would be allocating towards storm drainage. I would suggest that that's probably in the ballpark anyway, because a lot of the roads that we're talking about are not curb and gutter and storm sewer roads that we'd be putting in drainage. These are open ditch roads with culverts. And so the cost per mile to do ditch cleaning and culvert replacement is much less expensive than it would be to do curb, gutter, storm sewer, manholes, catch basins, those types of things. The majority of the township, I don't believe, is gonna require stormwater pump stations either. So, $91,000, $94,000 per mile, it is at least a good gut check type of a number to say that we're in the ballpark. It's certainly not as thought out and methodical as the rest of the report is. And that's really just predicated on the lack of information that we have of where the improvements are needed and where they're not. So that's kind of where we're at with that. There was some discussion on how we might go about prioritizing street improvements. And while I can't tell you which street, do the street first and the street second, the street third, and I would agree with the supervisor's comments that ultimately that's going to be a board decision. There are some factors that we would recommend that go into that. The first of which is when you're looking at spending dollars for road improvements, the dollars with the best payback, the dollars that get you the most bang for the buck, are keeping good roads in good condition. So I'm talking about maintenance activities like crack sealing, seal coating, milling, and overlaying. It's much more expensive to fix something that's broken than it is to keep something that's decent in good shape. And that's been proven out by studies over time. So when we approach this and when we look at this, working through this a committee that we would be looking to establish and then ultimately making a recommendation to the board, we probably would be looking at saying, we recommend that you look at doing rehabilitation projects first. Because you get the best bang for the buck. You're also going to impact the largest number of residents in the least amount of time. So I think those are good things.
And I'm just gonna jump in there. The flip side of that is, the county's match program was only for reconstruction of roads that had deteriorated.
Right.
So when I say to you, you say, well, the best dollar to spend is on keep getting another 10 or 20 years out of a road. The flip side is imagine if I get $2 for every dollar I spend. That kind of throws the equation off too.
Well, you knew exactly where I was going next. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Sorry.
The other next factor I would consider is if we've got projects where the township has an opportunity to get matching funds. We talked about the county offering up maybe 50-50 on local roads. The other thing that we've got is that for collector streets that are on the National Highway Program, the match on those is 80 or 90%, where the township only pays 10 or 20% to get those roads improved. So once again, a small amount of money that gets you a large amount of investment.
And the county might even split that share.
Right, exactly. So those are some of the factors that we would look into as far as prioritizing roads. A third very key factor that we did touch upon is the condition of the utilities underneath. I think that we would be focusing on areas where either we know that we need to go in and do an improvement to the sewer and the water to bring them up to standards, and then we'd want to replace the road on top of them, so that the sewer and water and the roads start to age at the same time. They're new at the same time, and then they get old essentially at the same time. We wouldn't recommend that we go through and reconstruct a road that doesn't have sewer on it. That's one of the recommendations in the report. Another one of the recommendations that we would look at is to go through and do projects, especially pavement preservation projects, like I said, the milling, the overlaying, crack sealing, in areas that have good utilities now, because those are areas that we're not going to have to be excavating and doing work in for a period of time. So those are just some of the factors that we would look at doing. There is some rational basis to it, better than just throwing a dart at the wall or something like that. So I wanted to just bring those up to the board.
Okay, thank you. Other comments or questions, board members?
I appreciate that on the prioritization, and I guess I would say that that's the kind of, and I realize it's hard to get very detailed, but I do think that that's the kind of information that residents will need to make an informed decision on this proposal should it pass and be on the ballot. You know, it would be very disappointing for me to think that, you know, I think it's a good point that we want to preserve good roads. Well, that might be completely contrary to what a resident might think.
Oh, there's no question. When someone says, why, my road is more cold patched than it is original asphalt, and you're going over to that road that's in good shape and you're putting an inch and a half on top, that doesn't make any sense to me. But again, that's a part of the process of getting citizen involvement, getting this information out. It's worth noting the deputy supervisor, as he had mentioned to me that as we'd received calls from residents seeing this on the agenda, saying, well, what's going on and what is this all about? You know, workshops, we don't get a lot of participation, so there really weren't too many citizens at that. So it's an electronic format. Anyone who's asked, he's sent out the road report, emailed it to them. Anyone who has a question, you know, his phone's gonna ring off the hook tomorrow, send him an email, give him a call, ask him to forward that report, and, you know, it's a public document, people can read it for themselves. There's different levels of interest there, but there's no doubt that there are plenty of residents who would appreciate to read that in-depth information. There's others that say, you know, I fell asleep on page 3, you know.
You need the Reader's Digest for it.
That's right, yeah, condense it down, so. Other comments? Hearing none, we'll open up the floor for public comment.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Marshall Rosquin. Couple of things. One, thank you for the overview. I think that as a resident, and as trustees and as representatives of the township, it really would behoove you to have that information before you vote to put it on the ballot. Otherwise, you're just voting to give us the opportunity to raise our taxes without really specifying what we are going to be giving ourselves if we vote yes. So without knowing that before you put it on the ballot and having a ballot language and having a defined or measurable objective document outlining what you want to accomplish, I think you should table it and vote at the time you have that. But more importantly, I think that we are doing a disservice by not holding the county accountable. I tried to read through Public Act 51, and I saw nothing where the townships were considered owners of local roads, only villages and cities. So I'm under the belief that everything is under the county ownership. They have the responsibility not only for maintaining them, but fixing them. So, and then, Mr. Witt, you said to the group that it's a broken system and that we can't get it to work, so let's raise the taxes and get the money to do it. Well, that sets a new precedent, too. Why should we pay additional taxes for services we're already taxed on? We are paying taxes to the county for them to maintain our roads, so why would we want to pay a second tax? The third thing is Mr. Verkes was talking about the benefit versus the cost. Measuring the benefit to an individual is a very subjective thing where cost is objective. So it's apples and oranges. It's very difficult to measure that. And then with regard to the Department of Roads, there was mention that we are partners with them. And I would argue that too. We're not really partners with them. We are their customer. We feed them, we give them the opportunity to serve us. So we should be very demanding, and we shouldn't take no as the answer. 98% of people take no as their first response in any kind of transaction when they're dissatisfied. Only like 1/10 of 1% ever get what they want, and that's because they keep pushing back. I think as my elected representatives, I would like to see you keep pushing back on the county and to say, hey, show me where in Public Act 51 the township is the owner of local roads. And I'll show you where we've deeded them all over to the county and that you have the responsibility to take care of them. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment. Try to answer some of the questions or address them to the best that I can. Policy before a millage, I absolutely agree. We need to have a policy before we ask people to vote. we went through a great deal in drafting the road report, and the policy is pretty much outlined in the road report. But this board needs to adopt something. And the board is in no position to say we adopt the road report. The road report doesn't define things. It talks about a 5-member citizen body, or a breakdown of 25% in this case, 100% in that case. Perhaps I think there's something about a set aside for paths. I believe the policy exists in the sense that the road report outlines what it is recommended that this board does. But there's a need for us to literally write that out, spell that out, and say, this is a policy, this is a policy, that's a policy. This board ultimately defines that. But even if we adopt a policy, citizens have to know. Next year, we could say, well, we've abandoned that policy, and you only get your road redone if you are a board member. I mean, that policy is our best attempt right now to do what we need to do, but it is something that is likely to be a living document. I absolutely believe, and I brought it up, we need to have a policy that we can present to voters before we do this. But if this board doesn't wish to go forward, I'm not interested in spending a good 20 to 30 hours with the engineer codifying the road report into policy form when the board says we're just simply not interested in asking the voters to consider that. Holding the county accountable and the ownership of roads, it's important to understand, I don't care if you see a green truck, a yellow truck, a white truck, a blue truck on the side of the road and someone's doing work. It doesn't matter whether they're a state employee, a county employee, a federal employee. There is nobody out there working that you and I didn't pay for to be there. The fact is, Public Act 51 doesn't say that townships own the roads. Public Act 51, and I can provide that section to you. I'd be happy to email that to you. Yep. Public Act 51 says that local road improvements in townships won't be done without a match. So the county is prohibited from spending Public Act 51 dollars, which is gas taxes, on local roads without a match, without matching dollars. So don't get me wrong. I was exactly where you are today, saying this is nuts. The county gets the money. The fact is, the county spends $0 on local roads. And I'm confident that before me at this board, and before me and next to me on several other township boards are some pretty persistent people. There are no dollars for local roads. There are no dollars for main roads. Right now, the county is, and people throughout Michigan are, I guess you'd say, championing the cause in Lansing to get more dollars to spend. But when you hear Lansing talking about spending money on road improvements, they're not talking about your local road. Nobody's coming to do your local road. It's not happening. There is no funding for local roads. But ultimately, whether there is funding, what if Lansing instituted a tax tomorrow that it was a local road gas tax? One way or another, you're paying for it. The only problem is if you pay it to Lansing, you may or may not get it back. So if you want the road in front of your street repaired, you are going to pay. If you pay it to the county or the state, it may get spent in Shelby Township or it may be spent in Grand Rapids. But if it's in the form of a local millage, it can't be spent anywhere but Harrison Township. It is a broken system, I understand. Oh, it's broken, so we should raise taxes. I understand that you feel that way. There is no tax structure. We do not pay a county tax for roads. We pay gas taxes. We pay the same per gallon gas tax that we paid in 1997. The gas tax has not been raised. Sales tax is assessed, but that isn't used for roads. So whatever it is, the 19 cents per gallon, it's the same 19 cents per gallon we paid in 97. The only difference is now the cost to do the roads is higher, and we literally consume less gallons annually than we did in 1997. Cars are more efficient. We don't literally even give Lansing as much money as we did in 1997, not adjusted for inflation, actual real dollars. Lansing has not adjusted that number since 1997, and as a result, we're billions behind in funding roads. But if we start paying more gas taxes, it's not coming to local roads. Measuring the benefit, I absolutely agree. It is subjective. It is very difficult to say, well, this would benefit me more than someone else. I can't make that decision. It is very subjective. And that's the very reason I believe this should be on the ballot. If a majority of people say, I don't believe that's gonna benefit me in ratio to the amount that this will cost me, they should vote no, and I'm completely content with that answer. The issue is, the people in this township should have the right to give that consideration, make that decision themselves. And I believe that's the right thing for us to do. And as I'd said in an earlier communication with you, I respect if you choose to vote no. There's nothing wrong with that. And if a majority of people vote no, at least when someone calls next year and they say, doggone it, my road is broken, what can we do about it? I can say, well, we studied it, we looked into an option, and the voters were not willing to pay a road millage, so your only option now is a special assessment district because a majority of people weren't interested in it. Or it could be the other way. A majority of people decide that a road millage they believe is the best way to do it. Those people get to make that decision themselves. I'm merely advocating that we trust the voters and let them make the decision. And well before we give them that decision, and I brought it up early on in this discussion, we need to make sure that we give everyone that information. So we need to produce a document that answers these questions. Why is this? Why is that? What is a millage? My home costs this much. How much will the millage be to me? Et cetera, et cetera. Those things need to be spelled out. Policies. I live on a dirt road. What happens? I live on a private road. I live in a condo. What about bike paths? Those questions all need to be answered in that document. The answers to those questions are in the road report. I'm merely suggesting that this board, if we put this on the ballot, then come back and look at policies that we adopt should the millage pass that are in essence extensions of what the report says.
You know, it's just a suggestion. You know, we've had the benefit to read the report, and we had a special meeting. I think we were here a couple, 3 hours, you know, going over it. You know, maybe just put that report on the website. You know, I think that we're all trying to be transparent here. I'm not trying to hide anything. You know, maybe just put it on there and people can view it at their own leisure.
I had the same thought first thing
You
tomorrow
know,
morning.
that probably might save you some work at least.
Yep.
Phone will still ring, but it'll be on there.
Yep. Put a link on the website.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I don't think anybody wants to pay for roads, but I think a lot of people realize they need to. And we do need to. Our roads are, in 2012, we all sat around and said, you know, the infrastructure's in pretty bad shape in this community. And we all realized then, and it's not any better now, it's not gonna get any cheaper moving forward. And like you said, money has been taxed at the 97 rate.
You know, Mr. Supervisor, I think it's interesting to note in this, just in the June issue of a township periodical, the executive director, Larry Merrill of the Michigan Township Association, headline article, not their responsibility, but townships are instrumental in good local roads. And it's just kind of interesting that it's a June 14 editorial where Mr. Merrill discusses the fact that, you know, it's theoretically or actually a county responsibility, but over 160 million is spent annually by townships on their roads. Just interesting that it's in this issue of this magazine this month.
Yeah, just